Thank you. Thank you, Warren. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone who's joining us on Facebook. And just a correction, Warren, in an introduction, it's not an article in the Shambhala. It's an upcoming book with Shambhala Publications that is called Illumination, a Guide to the Buddhist Study, Practice of Method of No Method. So thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. Thank you. So I want to thank everyone for being here. And if you feel comfortable, I'd like to invite you to join me on the screen by turning on your video. It's often very helpful for me to be more connected with everyone when I can see you. And I hope it feels the same to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing that. It's a little easier than staring at a screen, black screen. Thank you. Okay. I want to express my gratitude for this opportunity to reflect on the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. Gives me an opportunity to look into some sutra and sastras to think about this topic. And it's going to be a series. I don't know how long it will take, but we will get started today. The reason why I like to talk about this topic, especially practicing with the Four Noble Truths as a Chan practitioner. The reason why I like to talk about this topic is especially with as a practicing with the Four Noble Truths as a Chan practitioner, is that Chan practice is the actualization and application of the Buddha's teachings. And the Buddha's teachings, it's encompassed in the teachings in the Four Noble Truths. It's really important to understand that, because a lot of people think that, oh, Four Noble Truths, that's like Dharma 101. I got it, so I'm going into much more advanced thing and kind of just leave it behind and not keep that in our mind. And when the truth is the heart of our practice, when we engage in Chan practice, we are remembering the teachings in the Four Noble Truths, applying it with and so that we can realize it every moment. And what's the Four Noble Truths quickly? So we will be elaborating that. First Noble Truth, there is suffering, and we'll be talking about it today. And the second Noble Truth is often translated as the origin of suffering. And but the character in China, those who know Chinese will be able to relate to this better. But it's explained in the Sastra. Actually, means the coming together. The coming together of what? Coming together of what's happening in the present moment and our vexations. So that is what bring about suffering. And so you can see the first and second Noble Truth as a set of cause and effect. It's the coming together of the present moment with our habits of vexation, reacting to the present moment with vexation, that results in the first Noble Truth, that is, there is suffering. And the third Noble Truth is the cessation of suffering. It's possible for cessation to cease. That is the one of the important discoveries by Buddha, that that we are not condemned to suffering, that it's possible for cessation to cease. And the fourth Noble Truth is the path we often heard of that is the Eightfold Noble Path, everything we learn and engage in the practice. And so what's the path? It's the path to cessation of suffering. So that means every moment we remember to practice and stay in the path, that's a moment we do not give rise to our habits of vexation. Then when that does not come together with what's happening, suffering does not arise. So that's so the third and the fourth noble truth together, that is a set of cause and effect relationship. Also, the cultivation of path of Eightfold Path bring about the cessation of suffering, result in cessation of suffering. And we will go into that in more detail, but like really the path is about cultivating the understanding, a right view, and also and realizing the true nature of existence. What's the true nature of existence? That every moment is the coming together of many constantly changing causes and conditions. And we often hear this through the term emptiness. And emptiness can suggest that things don't exist. No, everything exists. This moment, right here, right now, me with you exists most definitely. It's just that things don't exist inherently, independently. And but it's the coming together of constantly changing causes and conditions. And thus is impermanent. And every moment is brand new. And when we can truly understand and apply it and realize it every moment, then we can be free from suffering, because we will be able to be free from our unhelpful habits of reacting to the present moment with vexation. So that is what we are practicing, what we are doing in Chan practice. And you might have heard of the 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel, and I encourage you to look at the book, Setting in Motion the Dharma Wheel. That's Master Sheng Yan's teaching on the Four Noble Truths. It's a very small book, but it's very rich. And in it, he talked about the 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel that we might often have heard. What are the 3 turnings? 3 turnings, it's about how we engage with the practice of the Four Noble Truths. The first turning is to understand what the Four Noble Truths is, meaning that we study the Dharma to make sure we understand the meaning of the Four Noble Truths conceptually, and sort out what it is correctly. So we often think, oh yes, suffering, I know. Like I know. It's like chances are there's some place that's not quite not quite clear. So really making sure that we understand it. And the second turning is putting one's understanding into practice. Oftentimes that's not what we do. And Master Shin in this book said that it's like, I have these, monastic students, who talk about like, who come to me complaining about things. And then it's like, but it's like, they understand the Four Noble Truths. Like they even teach it themselves. Like, what's going on? Like, they don't practice. They don't put it into practice. Do we put understanding of the Four Noble Truths into practice? It's pointing to the fact that the teachings of the Four Noble Truths is not just some knowledge. It's not just some, oh, okay, like I got, like, there's a Four Noble Truth. And like you might think, oh yeah, that makes sense. I agree with it. Okay, I got it. And then that's how we deal with knowledge, right? And then, but like we don't do anything with it. Then that would be a shame. The whole reason for the Buddha to give us the teaching is so that we would apply it. And we have to apply it in our life, in our daily life, recognize the how they operate, how the Four Noble Truths shows up in our daily life, moment to moment. And in order for us to realize the Four Noble Truths, realizing meaning we truly realize how we give rise to our suffering moment after moment. Like we might think, oh yeah, I guess it. Yeah, like we create our suffering, but it's like we don't believe it. We think like, nah, like not really, or only once in a great while. Like, no, we give rise to our suffering. Do we know it? Do we recognize it? And so truly being able to realize that we give rise, how we give rise to our suffering, the second noble truth, how that it is really the very entrenched habits of reacting to the present moment with vexation. And when we can really see it in our life, moment after moment, then we are realizing the first and second noble truth. And when we practice the Dharma, like practice following the precepts, following a practice, cultivating clear awareness using meditative practice, every moment we remember to practice, that's the moment we remember to refrain from falling into these entrenched habits of reacting to the present moment with vexation. And that's the moment that vexation does not come together with present moment. And that's the moment suffering does not arise from that. That's the cessation of suffering in that moment. Then that we are realizing the third and the fourth noble truth. And so that's what it means by realizing, and every one of us can do it if we understand the teaching correctly, making sure that that's so, and apply it, practice it. And then we can realize it. But like just understanding it without practicing it, without a second turning, then I want to realize it. How? Like it's just like a wishful thinking. Like, and so some people hear the term like noble truth, and the term like truth can kind of get, some people get hung up with it. And the word truth here does not mean that this is some like rule, some higher being came up with, and we just like believe in it. Is truth refers to this refers to the true nature. It's pointing out the true nature of our existence as human beings. And it's not something for us to just believe in because some important person or high being spoke it. So like I said, it's for us to really understand and practice it. And why is it noble? In the Visuddhimagga, pointed out, and Master Shin also mentioned that it's called noble because the noble ones, the Buddhas and Arhats, penetrate these noble truths. I want to point out penetrating meaning they really understand it, investigate it, look into how it shows up in our life in many, many, many different ways, all of our life as we go through all moments of our life, to investigate and see for themselves that is so, to realize the Four Noble Truths. So penetrating the Four Noble Truths. So it's not just accepting it as some general principle and think it makes sense. Oh yeah, it makes sense. And kind of just have this vague notion of what it is. And also just selectively focus on part of it. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I really like the Fourth Noble Truth. I was just like, okay, there are other parts, kind of just not really worried about it. No, no. The noble ones penetrate the entirety of it. Because many people hear the teaching, right? when they hear about the teaching of that there is suffering, instead of penetrating it, often will let their existing habitual reactivity take over and fall into the habit of aversion, one of the most entrenched vexation. And this kind of thinking is like, oh, suffering, that sounds bad. I don't want it. Like, that's bad. And it's a problem. Like, yes, I can see that. Like, this is a problem in my life that needs to be fixed. I need to get rid of suffering and get rid of it as quickly as possible. And so, yes, I let me go and skip to the third noble truth. Like, that's a good one. I know that's what I need to, that's what I want. And it says, well, how do I bring about cessation of suffering? Well, the Eightfold Path. That's all I need. That's all I need to focus on. Seize this habit thinking instead of truly penetrating the Four Noble Truths. Think that you pick one that you like, following your existing unhelpful habitual reactivity, the vexation. And think that, oh, okay, all I need to do is to focus on the Eightfold Path without bothering to truly understand the first and second noble truth. When we do not understand the first and second noble truth, we won't be able to stop giving rise to vexations and be free from suffering. And also this attitude of picking and choosing and thinking we can just selectively focus on some part of the teaching. That is not penetrating the Four Noble Truths. And that's why Master Shen Yan, in his book on the Four Noble Truths, mentioned how we should pay attention to suffering in our own lives and how suffering originates, the first and second noble truth. He's pointing, why did he say that? Well, he's pointing out our tendency as like, oh yeah, suffering is bad, like it's a problem, we just skip over it. Like, I already got it. I was like, yeah, they're suffering, without bothering to really understand what it is. And Master Shen Yan also explained why is it called noble, because that is genuine, timeless, and necessary. I thought I would talk about this. Like, genuine, referring to how it cannot be discredited. It's not like sort of other kinds of a theory or of scientific findings that is like when we get more data, it's like, oh, actually what we knew about this disease, is not what it is. And then we'll find out that it's wrong. The Four Noble Truths, like you look, you can look and look and look, collect more data. And what you'll find is that just practice, look at your own experience, look at your own experience of suffering and practice the Eightfold Path. You see, yes, the Buddha didn't make it up. How the first and second noble truth work, and how the third and the fourth noble truth work. So that's what he means by genuine and cannot be discredited. And we can find out for ourselves that and see that it is indeed true. We don't need to just believe in it. We can look into our life to realize it is so. And Master Shen Yan said also it's timeless, referring to it's universal. That suffering and the end of suffering is not limited to a particular time period of culture, meaning it's like it's not just true in Asia where Buddhism originates. Here all the way to the other side of the world, it's like with very different culture. We have very different history here. It's like You look into your own experience. Yes, indeed, there is suffering. There's and how suffering come to be. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter your background. It's not that it's true for men, not for women. No, it's like everyone. Doesn't matter how powerful, how wealthy, or how much or little education you have. And also, it's not just true when the Buddha was talking about it. It's still true now. Still the case. And also, very importantly, that it is necessary. That like the Four Noble Truths needs to be penetrated, understood, practiced in order and realized in order for cessation of suffering to happen. We need to truly penetrate, understand, practice, and realize the Four Noble Truths to be free from suffering. So that's why it's called the Noble Truths. So, first Noble Truth. The first Noble Truth, there is suffering. I would like to invite you to pay attention to how this is phrased. There is suffering. So it is pointing out to us a fact of our existence. Yeah, it's basically the Buddha saying how, say, do you see there is suffering here? Do you see that? Like, so do we know that? Do we know there is suffering? If we do not know that there is suffering, meaning that we experiencing suffering, then we will not see the need to practice, right? So oftentimes I encounter a practitioner who tell me how they meditate and then they fall asleep when they're meditating, or they can't find time to practice. Well, there are many reasons. Well, one of the things that one might want to look into is to see if you think you need to practice. And if we do not see that we suffer, then we won't see the need to practice, to study the Dharma, to cultivate understanding of the Dharma concepts, and to learn how to apply the understanding into our lives to realize the teaching. And the Buddha talked about the Dharma teaching being a medicine to heal us from the disease of suffering. So you can use your own experience. If you're not aware that you are sick, you're not aware you have a health condition, of course you won't go to a doctor. You won't go and consult with a doctor. You won't ask the doctor what you need to do to get well. And or you may go to the doctor, you don't believe the doctor. You don't thought the doctor's just talking about someone else. I'm not sick. Then you won't take the medicine prescribed by the doctor. You may know people like that. Maybe you're one of the people, like you'd go to an actual doctor as like, I don't really need to take this, and so then the medicine may be available, but we don't benefit from it. We continue to have our illness. Similarly, when we are not aware of the fact that there is suffering in our life, then we will not see the need to engage in the practice. We won't. We're not convinced. And here I just want us to be aware of our habitual reactivity to suffering using this analogy, right? Because again, here we're talking about using the analogy of suffering being a sickness. And then, of course, we also have negative association with being sick. It's like, oh, thinking of being sick is a problem, is bad. And we go back to that whole habitual reactivity of hating it. It's like, oh, I hate suffering. And then, I need to get rid of it. Then if we do that, then we fall right back into the erroneous view of forgetting that suffering, like everything else, is empty. Remember, suffering is the coming together of the present moment with our habitual reactivity of vexations. Suffering is not a thing. It's not an inherently, independently existing entity to be gotten rid of. So notice that thought, though, in our mind. It's not uncommon for us to fall into that, because this habitual reactivity of fixation is entrenched. So I hope you can see that the first order of business, or first turning of the Dharma wheel, is to understand what suffering is. And the first order of business is to recognize the fact that there is suffering by cultivating conceptual understanding of dukkha. Dukkha, that's the Sanskrit term from which the word suffering is used as translation. I realized recently how important it is to get this sorted out, because I was teaching a Dharma course recently, and people use the term suffering, and then like they are referring to things that's not suffering, and so it's really important to get our understanding correctly. Right? And you might, and in the sutra, there is often this list of things that is referred to as suffering, and that needs clarification. So the common list is that what is suffering? Like birth, aging, sickness, death, and being stuck with people we don't like or things that we don't like. We can relate to that. Being separated from our loved ones, we probably can relate to that. And also not getting what we want. Right? You can relate to that. Like so now you'd be like, okay, that's part of life. Like I'm born, like there's like I get sick, there's aging and there's death. And if that is suffering, then I'm stuck with suffering. How is it possible for us to be free from suffering? Right? This is where it is important to make sure we understand the concept correctly going into the teachings. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to really go dig into the sastras to get this sort of to help us. So in the Visuddhimagga, there is this footnote to explain this. Like it's like tasting how birth is not called suffering because of having suffering as its individual essence. What it means is that birth itself is not inherently suffering, all right? But rather because it is the foundation for suffering. So meaning like because there's birth, we're born as human being with this body, then we go through life, there is aging, there's sickness, there's death, that's inevitable. That is what happens when we have a body, and then we live with others in social relationship, then we may be stuck with people we don't like. We will be separated from those we love and not getting what we want. That's just what happens in life. And because we don't control everything. It's all because everything's the coming together of causes and conditions. And so all these, they are called suffering but they are really basis for suffering. So that means they are basis for suffering. That meaning things that happen in our life serves as basis for suffering, but they are not in essence suffering itself. This is important to sort out clearly. Otherwise, when we misunderstand the teaching, then we think that life is suffering. That is actually not an uncommon way people talk about the first noble truth. Instead of stating that there is suffering, it's like, hey, do you see there is suffering? Do you realize that there is suffering? That is true nature. That there is this is the effect of our existence. We turn it into life is suffering, everything is suffering, and then not see that how it will be possible for us to be free from suffering. When we fall into that, then means we completely ignore the third and the fourth noble truth. We just don't believe it is possible for cessation of suffering to happen. And of course, then we do not believe in the point of cultivating the path. Right? And that's rooted in this misunderstanding of the teaching of the first noble truth. And when we think that, the body gets sick and then we all die and we are separated from our loved ones, and that's suffering itself, then we may give up. When we give up on the practice, and we may in our own way find ways to solve the problem of suffering, instead of following the path, instead of studying the Dharma and practicing the Dharma. And this is all, and of course, then it causes more suffering, trying to, maybe some people become very nihilistic. Like, that's what leads some people to conclude that like Buddhism is like so negative. You think life is all suffering, which is not what the Buddha was teaching. But like this negativity that can arise, and then hating our existence, of course, generate more suffering. And all this is due to our ignorance. Ignorance, like meaning our lack of clarity, lack of clear understanding of the teaching itself and the true nature of our existence. So, how do I understand this aging and sickness and death correctly? Well, aging, sickness, and death, that is what happens due to impermanence of the body. So birth, we're born into this body, and this body is not permanent. Thank goodness it's not permanent, because like your mom could tell you, when you were born, you don't have the body you have now. You're like, my mom always would tell me, is like, when you were born, you're like this big, you're 5 pounds. I'm like much more than 5 pounds, right? So, and I couldn't walk and all that stuff. So just remembering that, like, help remind us that this body is impermanent, and because of impermanence, we have the body we have now, right? And so, and they are the basis for suffering, meaning that they are not in themselves suffering, but when we do not realize and accept the true nature of the reality of this body, that is impermanent, that's the coming together of causes and conditions, that having this body means that we will be experiencing the impermanence of the body that shows up in the form of aging. And sometimes the body gets sick, and death, when the causes and conditions of the body staying alive no longer come together. It is when we do not realize and truly accept moment to moment the true nature of living with this body, that is the suffering, resisting, refusing to accept it. It's not, this acceptance is not some conceptual acceptance. Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, no. It's, we truly penetrate this truth and see for ourselves that this is so. It is not just an intellectual exercise. So I like to really enjoy the process of preparing this talk. And it led me to get to go into some of the sutras in the Samyutta Nikayas. There's this paragraph I like to share with you. It's a conversation between the Buddha and this king, the king Pasenadi of Kosala, where he says here, Buddha said, "Great king, no one who is born is free from aging and death. Even those affluent Katiyas, rich with great wealth and property, with abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, because they have been born, they are not free from aging and death." And then it goes on, go through different kinds of people. But I want you to, but we might think, yes, if I'm wealthy enough, like I can be free, all right, from that. So like it go through different kind of people, affluent, even like affluent householders, rich with abundant wealth and grain. And because they have been born, they are not free from aging and death. And the next sentence, even those monks who are arhats, whose taints are destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, utterly destroyed the fetters of existence, and are completely liberated through final knowledge. Even for them, this body is subject to breaking up, subject to being laid down. No one who is born is free from aging and death. Even the arhats, even those who are liberated. I'd like to invite you to pay attention to your thoughts and feelings in reaction upon hearing this passage from the sutra. Are you a little surprised? Not even arhats. I thought that's like they are special, like they're free. Or disappointed that no one, absolutely no one, even the arhats, the enlightened, liberated one, can be free from aging and death. I'd like you to look into that. Without understanding dukkha correctly, we may either misbelieve that we are condemned to suffering, because hearing that like, oh, aging, sickness, and death is suffering, instead of correctly understanding it as the basis for suffering. That it is our inability to recognize and accept their inevitability that is the suffering. That we don't recognize that we, like everyone else, however wealthy, powerful, successful, or enlightened we become, not free, cannot be free from aging and death. So our practice is to correctly penetrate this passage, to wake up to the fact that no one is exempt from aging. Not even the arhats who have lived a holy life and are completely liberated. Because think about it, if we believe that aging and sickness and death itself is suffering, then we may think, wouldn't the arhat be free from aging and sickness and death if the arhat is liberated? Otherwise, what would be the point of practicing? What would be the point of following the path? Do you have a question about that? It's like if we think, suffering, aging, death, that's suffering itself, and the arhats accomplish the path, liberated. And so cultivating correct understanding, we realize that the practice, we're not practicing to be free from aging, sickness, and death. Rather, we practice so that we can give rise to less suffering when the body goes through the process of breaking up in the form of aging, sickness, and death. And some of you have better idea than others, but the process of the body breaking up in the form of aging is very challenging. In the Visuddhimagga, detail like why aging is so difficult. Like that's why it's a basis for suffering. And I want so if you think like it's hard not to suffer because of aging, yes, it is, and should not blame yourself, should not feel terrible about that. It's like it's hard. Like the Visuddhimagga listed like how like, well, what is aging? It's like, well, every faculty declining, relate to that, like and vanishing of youthfulness. It's like and memory and your intellect growing dim, like the mind just does not work so well, and then I can't remember things, and then the word doesn't come, and then the mind you can't think of things so quickly, and the strength drained. You can't do what you used to do. I had a friend who runs a marathon, and every time he shows how long it takes for him to run it, is like, oh, this is not as good as how it used to be. It's like, still pretty good, you're running a marathon. But he focused on how he couldn't run it as fast as he used to. And growing an attractiveness. like So that is part of aging. And with that, contempt of others. Because we are becoming less attractive, less youthful for others, especially in our youth worshiping culture. But it's the case even in the more ancient time. That's why aging is the basis for suffering. The practice here is to recognize that this process of aging of the body slowly deteriorating is natural. It's a natural part of having a body. And it is our resistance to this fact, our hating it, our aversion, that's the suffering. It's not the aging itself inherently. That's suffering. And it is very, very important to cultivate clear awareness of the subtle thoughts that we harbor around these points and the confusion that we might have. Ask ourselves, do we equate aging with suffering? Because if we do, our minds slip into this thinking that like, oh, okay, if the practice is to be free from suffering, and since aging is suffering, that means the practice is to be free from aging. And when we go down that road, without our knowing, we become attracted to what we call non-Buddhist path that emphasizes its efficacy in keeping you young. We have no shortage of those, but like, of course, there are some less, like, oh, take this pill, but like, there's something that look like spiritual practice. They may even look like Buddhist practice, but they are not. They're not. But like emphasize the efficacy in keeping you young, getting your like youthful energy back, and stopping the body from deteriorating. And we like, oh, that sounds good. We already want it. So I have met many people who started with the Dharma practice, and but because they did not establish clear, accurate understanding about dukkha, about what suffering is, or then they become misguidedly wanting to stop suffering by stopping the body from aging. It's like aging, suffering. I'm practicing to stop suffering. That means I'm practicing to stop aging. It's easy to go down that path. And again, remember, aging is natural because the body is impermanent, the coming together of causes and conditions. When we don't see that, forget that, which is our default is to forget, then we can go down the path and go into practice like energy work. And I know people who like really go into eating in a very, very particular way. It's like, oh, this food is for this energy and this food is like anti-aging, all those things in the very, very elaborate system of food consumption to reverse the aging process. And you probably have encountered that. And you may even be practicing that, right? And become carried away, believing that is the path itself. Like that, like forget the Eightfold Path, like that's the path, like that becomes your path. And believe that they are practicing. Believe that they are practicing. They drove all the energy into doing that. Do we know? Do we know if that's what we are doing? That's the Chan practice of cultivating clear awareness, what we are doing. Now, there is nothing wrong with eating healthy. I just want to make sure there's nothing wrong with eating healthy. There's nothing wrong with like engaging in practices, like some kind of energy work practice like Tai Chi or Qigong. Maybe many of you would do that, or yoga. There's nothing wrong with that. And they are, they can be very helpful with, without health. The question is, are we doing so with the secret wish that our body will not be subject to breaking up? That we can do this to be free from aging? Because we believe aging is suffering, and then there's this path to be free from suffering that is freeing from aging. Because if we must believe this is the practice, trying to do something to stop aging. When we notice that we practice, and then the body is still aging, we still get sick, then we may draw the conclusion that this practice doesn't work because we are confusing what we're doing with Dharma practice itself. We believe, oh, like that doesn't work. We stop doing it. That would be a shame. Also, when we become attracted to these practices, in order to stop our body from deteriorating, you can see in itself is suffering because we are resisting the true nature of reality. Why we are doing that? We are not allowing ourselves to experience fully the body as it is, moment to moment, and deprive ourselves the opportunity to realize its emptiness and impermanence, to see for ourselves that every moment this body is the coming together of causes and conditions. I've been going to some acupuncture treatment by my doctor. So some form of you can say energy healing, and so I can feel the energy flows when the acupuncture needles are in me, and I can I can feel the energy flowing, and like the days after the acupuncture, the area where my doctor's doing treatment, like there's like less pain, and there's like because of the better energy flow, like a little less fatigue. Is like the body, like with acupuncture, does part of the causes and conditions that bring about this different experience of the body. And my doctor went on vacation, and I had no acupuncture for a month, and I could feel, like a little more fatigue, and the part of that part that I didn't get treatments, like a little bit more pain. So yes, you can use this treatment as for us to realize, yes, indeed, the body is the coming together of causes and conditions. When there is this opportunity to encounter some kind of energy healing, yes, the body has different experiences. And so it's not about believing that this is a way to end suffering. So it's like, yes, I still go get acupuncture. I hope she will keep giving me appointment to do that. But we know clearly that it is, when it's done, then it alleviates some symptoms and helps the energy flow. But it's not to stop, aging or death, not to be free from aging and death. Do we know that clearly? And you may think, of course, I know everyone gets sick, that everyone ages, everyone dies. That's just the way it is. Of course, I know. Perhaps you do know and understand this conceptually as an abstract principle. But do we truly penetrate it? Or as Master Sheng Yen said, pay attention to it in our lives. Because when we do, we may realize how much we resist this fact, how much we resist the fact that the body breaks up, goes through aging, sickness, and there's death. There are many practitioners have told me over the years about stories of their loved one death. or themselves being diagnosed with a very serious illness like cancer. So a common way to experience is they just can't believe it actually happened. Just refuse to accept. Just bring about great sorrow and suffer greatly. And sometimes a practitioner tell me how like their elderly parent passed away, and they would say how, well, we were prepared, we were expecting it because she's very elderly, it's been ill for a long time, and when it happened, still a great shock. Still a great shock. It's just shocked by the fragility of life. And I had a practitioner who was diagnosed with a very serious illness, and for a while she's like, how can this be? Like I eat healthy, I exercise, like how can it be? So, but when it happens, we can make use of these moments to penetrate our mind, to see if we secretly wish that we can be exempt from aging, sickness, and death, despite our conceptual understanding. So, of course, I know everyone, ages and dies, but like we secretly wish that it doesn't apply to me and my loved one. We may, in our own way, believe that there is a way to escape aging, illness, and death. We just need to work hard to find it. Are we aware of our doing that? Harboring these secret wishes, resisting the reality of living with a body. Because when we do, that's the aversion, the habitual reactivity of fixation to the present moment experience of living with this body. That is what the suffering is, not the aging itself, not the fact that this body breaks up. So I'd like to share with you another passage from also the Samyutta Nikaya, where it's a conversation between the Buddha and the king, this same king, King Pasenadi of Kosala. So, and this is what was said by the king. Venerable sir, kings intoxicated with the intoxication of sovereignty, obsessed by greed for sensual pleasures, who have attained stable control in their country and rule over a great sphere of territory, conquer by means of elephant battles, cavalry battles, chariot battles, and infantry battles. But there is no hope of victory by such battles, no chance of success when aging and death are rolling in. In this royal court, venerable sir, there are counselors who, when the enemies arrive, are capable of dividing by subterfuge, but there is no hope of victory by subterfuge, no chance of success when aging and death are rolling in. Here, before this passage, talking about how aging and death are like these powerful armies rolling in from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west. In this royal court, Venerable sir, there exists abundant bullion and gold stored in vaults and lofts, and with such wealth we are capable of mollifying the enemies when they come. But there is no hope of victory by wealth, no chance of success when aging and death are rolling in. There is no chance of success when aging and death are rolling in on me. Here's this king. Doesn't matter. You are really good at conquering, ruling over huge territory. You have capable counselors, like maybe you have lots of knowledge, lots of professional expertise. You can go read every single thing about aging, death, and health and medicine, everything. You may be a doctor yourself. Abundant wealth, lots and lots of money. And this king is very wise and see clearly that even with his power, knowledge, and wealth, know clearly that there's no chance of success when aging and death is rolling in. And the only thing to do is to live by the Dharma. How about you? You may agree conceptually what is said here. Encourage you to practice looking into your mind. And you may notice subtle thoughts and beliefs that if only I could get more powerful or more successful or amass more knowledge or wealth or get enlightened, then I can keep aging and death at bay. Recognizing these thoughts and beliefs is crucial for releasing them. If we don't even know that we have these beliefs and these secret wishes, then we'll keep perpetuating them without our awareness, keep believing in them and try to act them out in our futile fight against the reality of living with this body. And don't assume that we don't do that. That's what the penetrating into the Four Noble Truth is about. And so, like, for example, the story of this practitioner I was talking about earlier, she was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of, a rare form of cancer a couple of years ago and went through a lot of treatments. And she, she kept saying how, like, it's like basically this belief, I couldn't believe it. Like, exercise every day, exercise a lot, and I was eat, like right, and I meditate every day, and just kind of like, how did this happen? Why would this happen to me? And underlying these comments and thoughts is the subtle belief that if I only get enough knowledge about how to live healthy and really be really vigilant about doing it, put in the effort and not doing all the right thing, then I can keep illness at bay. Right? Do you recognize this? Whereas here, Sutra said, no one can escape aging, illness, and death. Yet do we secretly believe we can do so? We can escape it by doing something if only I work hard enough. Because it happens to, you might know people like that. People who, I know of them, who talked to one actually recently, very religious. They engage in virtuous deeds, very generous, help other people. and then they become quite upset at who they are worshiping or what they're practicing when sickness and death befall them, as if they have made a deal. They believe they have made a deal, secret deal. If they do certain thing enough, that they could be exempt from sickness and death. And you may think, of course we can't. Like, yes, rationally, we know, but do we know if we secretly harbor that thought? That is what we can discover when we engage in Chan practice, looking into our subtle thoughts and feelings. Thinking about this lead me to think of an experience I had many years ago. I would share with you. Many years ago, I started encountering these articles about how much carcinogens are there in our food. So if you use tomato sauce and you use them from like a can, and the plastic coating in the can, it's like they are really carcinogens, and so you shouldn't use them. And then you should use the tomato sauce in a glass bottle. And then there are all these articles about how sugars are really carcinogens and all that stuff. And so it's like there are a lot of carcinogens in our food. And so I went through this period of just kind of being very vigilant about looking at where how the food's processed and the ingredients. And then when I was visiting my mom, of course, she wasn't paying any attention to that. And then so she was using all these at that time wrong ingredients. And then I get kind of uptight about all the food that she was cooking, and then couldn't really enjoy the food she cooked for me and appreciate her love that was shown through what she was cooking for me. And when I was going through that, I noticed how much it is suffering. So much suffering that in the suffering and the agitation that it caused, that compel me to kind of say these unkind words, and instead of being appreciative of my mom. And I was able to see how it's not in accordance with wisdom and compassion, that it is suffering. And where is it coming from? What is it? And this whole thing is about this really fear of dying from all the carcinogens in the food. And so it is not now. It was a very important realization. That's why I wanted to share with you that it was this belief, this subtle belief that I could do something if I just read enough stuff, I know about enough stuff, and be vigilant enough, that I try hard enough, I could avoid serious illness like cancer by not gaining exposure to carcinogens. Now, I haven't even got cancer, but I was already suffering greatly from the agitation and tension, from the fear every time I have to encounter some food, to worry that I am exposing myself to carcinogens. So it is the resistance to the fact that, yes, I can be careful, but what I do is only part of the causes and conditions. There are a lot of people who get cancer without engaging in unhealthy lifestyle, eating unhealthy food. Like my grandma was one of them. She never smoked, she never did anything unhealthy, and she got cancer. And so it is the uncertainty that we can't control everything that is part of our life, that when we do not realize it and are unwilling to accept this, that's suffering. Now, of course, it does not mean that we don't avoid carcinogens, right? So It's not that avoiding it is bad. So it's like I still, like pay attention to what I'm what I'm buying whenever I can. But when it's out of my control, like for example, eating a restaurant, eating at my friends, my parents, and just we enjoy the food, enjoy the time with them. Just accept that there's just going to be risk of exposure, and this is part of living in this world co-created by us. So we can do what we can, and so it does not mean that we don't take care of our body. But watch out when we are doing different things that we call like healthy lifestyle. Watch out for that secret wish that doing so will let us escape aging, sickness, and death, because that is the suffering itself, not the sickness and illness and death itself. When we accept the reality of living with this body that is subject to breaking up no matter what we do, that we can't escape aging, sickness, and death, however powerful, wealthy, knowledgeable, and enlightened we are, then we can truly live with this body as it is and enjoy it. Be with its impermanence. See clearly that every moment is the coming together of myriad causes and conditions, that this body is alive now. Do we see it? Yes. And that the heart is beating, that's like different part of the body is functioning. It's a miracle. It's working in its own way now. And it allows us to change our relationship with this body. That is not a problem to be fixed. It's the only body we have now. And so oftentimes when we experience the body aging, we fall into the habits of complaining about how it does not work or look the way it used to. And that is the suffering, resisting the true nature of reality. And that's what's happening when we are focusing only on what we have lost, the youthfulness or the memory or the intellect. When we engage in the Chan practice, of cultivating total clear awareness of the present moment and experience of the body as it is as a whole, everything, then we're able to recognize, like the knee, there's some knee pain, there's some neck pain. So like, yes. So maybe you like remember to get up and move around a bit, not sit too long, like in front of the computer. When you recognize there's knee pain from aging, then like when we walk, be more careful to avoid injury, recognize like short-term memory weakness. When you walk to the kitchens, like, why did I come to the kitchen? And so then you can be patient with yourself. Practice tracing our thought back to find out why you decided to come to the kitchen like a moment ago. We also recognize how the body still largely works. I was amazed I could still play tennis with my 15-year-old nephew. I just couldn't run around as much, and I could still do many things. And I could still remember many things, not everything, and still can come up with new ways to explain things. So, yes, there's aging, but it's still pretty good. It still largely works. And so, rather than resisting, hating the fact that body is aging, suffering, when we see our body, really allow our body to be experienced as it is, we're able to see that actually it's still pretty good, still breathing, still can do a lot of things. And naturally, the gratitude for what the body still allows us to do arises. And yes, the body deteriorates and ages, but does not need to be just suffering, lots of suffering. And similarly with sickness, right? We all have gone through experiences of sickness. And we can, of course, be careful with like what we eat and maintain some healthy lifestyle with, exercise and things like that. But we are not in control of all the causes and conditions that affect the body. We've just gone through a pandemic. There can be a highly contagious pathogen. Of course, we may be exposed to contaminated air or soil, other things that go into our food. And who knows what happens? Our cells are constantly dividing, and sometimes it divides in this funny way, and that end up becoming cancer. There's nothing we can do about it. That's all just happening. And so the reality is that the body is interconnected with the environment and cannot be isolated. We may think we can do something to isolate it from all these risk factors. It's like we need to, the body needs to interact with the environment to stay alive. So we accept that, yes, we can do our part to live healthy, but that's a part of having the body for it to be sick. And sometimes there might be serious sickness. And when we go through the experience of being sick, use the practice to stay with the changing sensations of the body as it is every moment to moment. And this is when the practice of sitting meditation, sitting with bodily discomfort, when there's knee pain or back pain, is so helpful. Practicing, staying with the changing sensations of the body, moment after moment. Whatever the sensation, it can be very strong discomfort, very strong, we can call pain, and remembering the impermanence that the painful sensation is emptiness. It's the coming together of causes and conditions. It's like, is it uncomfortable? Very, very uncomfortable, and can be just very, very difficult to bear. And when we remember to practice, you'll be amazed how little suffering we can give rise to, despite going through some very difficult, serious illness. And that means sickness need not become suffering. That's what the Four Noble Truth it's about. That is a aging, sickness, and death is a basis for suffering. It's up to us to remember the practice, to not turn it into suffering. So this practitioner who had to go through a serious cancer treatment, she would tell me how so surgery and there's radiation and there was chemo, and then a few months later, more cancer, another set of surgery, more chemo, and she was a long-time practitioner, and so she told me how, okay, that's what's happening, and that's the body, and she stay with the practice, accepting what the body is going through. And she admit that every time test comes up, to see if there's cancer. So, she thinks about it a lot. And so she's not pretending that she's not worried. It's like recognize it clearly. Practice with it. And so and she told me how she lives with a lot of pain in the area where the cancer was, and she was operated on. But she was like, but the rest of my body works. I can still go to take my walks, and I can still meditate and can still do many things. That's the practice. We can go through serious illness and not give rise to a lot of suffering. And of course, when we suffer a lot, we can inflict a lot of harm and pain on other people around us. And instead, she was thinking, about her daughter, how she can use this experience to connect with the pain her daughter goes through. That's the practice. So I encourage you to give this practice a try. And of course, I hope you can stay healthy, but like this is allergy season, so there's plenty of opportunity to practice with this, like sneezing, itchy eyes, like a bodily discomfort, the body feeling unwell. And notice the tendency, very entrenched habitual tendency to hate it, feel that like it's not supposed to be happening. That's the reality of having the body interacting with the environment. And so notice the moment when we fall into the habits of hating it. That's the moment we forget impermanence, forget that no one can escape illness. And then it helps us remember, come back to a practice, remembering the emptiness of the body. Emptiness meaning every moment of the body is coming together of causes and conditions. And stay with the changing sensations, experiencing it as it is. That whatever we're experiencing is constantly changing, constantly changing. So I hope this helps you with this particular part of the of our experience of suffering, and we will go into other aspects of this First Noble Truth.